Good evening and welcome to Pressing Issues. I'm your host, Jason Diffendahl, now that I'm off mute. Today is Sunday, January 17th, 2021. We've got a heck of a lot to talk about today. Lots of stuff going on in the Disney world, including the end of Extra Magic Hours, the end of Disney's Magical Express, and the end of Disneyland annual passes. So, bunch of craziness going on. Let me introduce my panel today. We have joining us, let's see, here we go. Joining us, Rich Grafton.
Hello, everyone.
And then we have two new panelists tonight, as promised. First one is Rob Bazemore.
A pleasure to be here, guys.
Welcome, Rob. And Heather Provost.
Hi.
And so, Rob and Heather, why don't you take 2 seconds to introduce yourselves to our audience?
You want to
Go ahead, Heather.
Ladies first.
Hello. I live in Los Angeles, and I'm a writer, director, producer, working in film and TV and theater out here. I have loved Disney my whole life. My family and I used to always go to the parks every year. Became an obsession, as I'm sure with all of you. I was in the original, a million years ago when I was an actor, I was in the original cast of Aladdin, a musical spectacular out here at the Hyperion Theater at California Adventure. And then when I started producing, they brought me in to lead some workshops for the Disney cast members conservatory out here. So I love Disney. I'm excited to be here and nice to meet all of you.
All right, Rob.
Wow, my life hasn't been nearly as exciting as hers, but I'm Rob Bazemore. I am also out in California, in the San Francisco area. I am actually originally a Florida native. I spent a lot of time out in Disney World, but now my family and I relocated out west to, I'm a program manager at one of those technology companies in Silicon Valley. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to experience Disney on both sides of the coast pretty frequently, and looking forward to a great conversation with all of you.
All right, welcome. Welcome to our new panelists. Without further ado, let's get right into this because we have a lot of news to cover today. And I'm sure I've got some rants coming up, and if not, I have notes from last week when I was down in Florida, so I have something to rant about. But anyway, let's take the end of Disney's Magical Express. So news came out Thursday, I want to say. No, news came out before Thursday. Disneyland annual passes came out Thursday. The news came out early this week. It was Monday. That Disney is ending Disney's Magical Express, effective the end of this year. This seems to be a short-term cost-cutting move as far as I'm concerned. But you know, there's two sides to this, right? So when we started with Disney's Magical Express a number of years ago, it was included in your hotel price. So it was effectively free. People thought it was free. But obviously...
No additional charge.
There was no additional charge, right? So obviously hotel prices goes up every year, and so it wasn't out of the question that Disney made up the cost of this. The reason that this worked is because, you know, there was a heck of a lot of people coming into Orlando International Airport, and you know, the economies of scale, I think, made Disney's Magical Express feasible and cheap enough for Disney to do. I mean, the other thing is, though, you'd kind of expect that we'd get back to that scale, back to that level of crowds at some point. But this, to me, seems like an easy place to cut costs. I'm sure the cost to have Mears run all those buses back and forth every day was quite expensive, even though it's not that long of a trip. But I know from talking to a lot of people, this was a great perk. They really appreciated essentially sort of like a packaged all-in-one kind of thing where you could book your hotel and transportation, and Disney just took care of everything. And so with the end of Magical Express, we're going to go back to 20 years ago when people had to come up with their own method of transportation from the airport to the resort. Now, I will admit that probably 90+% of the time I rent a car, and I always have for the most part, just because I find there's plenty of stuff to do around Orlando between restaurants and other resorts, Universal, SeaWorld, whatever. And so it to me, honestly, this doesn't make any difference that this is ending. There was one or two times where I did actually take Magical Express back to the airport. But for the most part, I never actually utilized it coming from the airport. I think once in all my years and all my trips, I remember doing it once. And that was a case where I was traveling with some other people. We weren't planning to go off property, and so we did it instead of having to rent a car. It was their first trip in quite a while, so they didn't really want to do anything off property, and so we just went with the Magical Express. I know people in the chat are saying they're hoping to get more money off parking for people who get rental cars. I think there's a fair amount of people that don't rent cars because either they don't go off Disney property or they're just concerned with driving in a place that they're unfamiliar with. And I'll be completely honest, driving around Walt Disney World is probably one of the most confusing things that I think you could face on a vacation. I mean, the signs are there. They're not great. Some signage is, in the wrong places. There's better ways to get places, but Disney sends you the long way, that kind of thing. So, but I get it. If you're on vacation and you want to be able to relax and not have to drive, a lot of people like that. And so what I think is that a lot of people are going to continue to take some kind of bus transportation from the airport to Walt Disney World. This existed before Magical Express. It was operated by Mears, same company that operates Magical Express and the same company that will operate bus transportation after Magical Express. I see some people in the chat talking about the train. To me, the train I don't see the train making that big of a difference, because here's my thought. You take the train from the airport to downtown, or Disney Springs, sorry. You take the train from the airport to Disney Springs, or you take the train from like Miami to Disney Springs. Then you've got to get from Disney Springs to your hotel with all your luggage. And that can't be that convenient. So if you don't have to deal with luggage, then I could see the train thing being a useful alternative. But I can't imagine a family of 4 with like 6 pieces of luggage having to deal with getting off the airplane, on the train, off the train at Disney Springs, and then getting to their hotel somehow with all that luggage and with kids and a stroller. So I would never do that if I was traveling with family. And so there's one thing I think that we have to talk about that is important to understand, and that is the luggage service. So Magical Express and the luggage service were two different things. Most people associated them together because you would receive luggage tags from Magical Express and put it on your luggage, and then it would just show up in the hotel. That was super convenient. The luggage service was run by a separate company called BAGS, BAGS, which was funded by a consortium of airlines. And so when you went to check your luggage at the hotel on the way back, you went to that little desk that most deluxe resorts and most of the other resorts, but not everyone, most of the resorts had a desk where you could check your luggage on certain airlines, Southwest, American. There were probably 5 or 6 airlines. You could check your luggage on these airlines right at the resort, and then not have to deal with it, lugging it back to the airport, standing in line at the airport. That was a fantastic service. And that's what I'm going to miss, because that is something I absolutely used a number of times, just because it's that much easier to do it at the hotel than to cram all your luggage into the rental car, drive back to the airport, return the rental car, then drag all that luggage from the rental car desk across to the airport counter and check it in. So you could do that regardless of whether you were using Magical Express to get back to the airport. And in fact, anybody could use that. Anybody could use that baggage service as long as they were flying on one of the airlines that worked with that service. And so that's what I'm going to miss. That service has not been back. Somebody in the chat says Bags is out of business, which it was funded by the airline, so that doesn't surprise me. But that service is the one I'm going to miss. That hasn't come back since the pandemic. So although Magical Express has been operating since Disney reopened in July, the baggage service has not. And that's why Magical Express, when you are coming to the airport, you have to claim your own luggage and take it onto the Magical Express bus with you now. The whole, your luggage is magically whisked to your room and left in your room doesn't happen anymore, because that was done by the Bags service. And so Bags worked because they had big trucks, and they would collect your luggage and take it to your resort, and then they would collect the luggage at your resort that people checked in and take it back to the airport. And so they had full trucks both directions to and from the airport to make that service, at least somewhat cost effective. And so that, I think, to me, is going to be the service that I miss the most. Not the buses, but the baggage service. I'll also point out that a lot of times the Disney Cruise Line transfers from Disney to Port Canaveral, or from the airport to Port Canaveral. Those are operated by Mears too. Mostly you're on Disney Cruise Line themed buses, but there have been plenty of times where Disney Cruise Line buses were used for Magical Express and vice versa, because it's all Mears and it's all the same buses. And I can't imagine the Disney Cruise Line service is going away, because that's contracted with Mears. Cruise Line is a separate facet of the Walt Disney Company, and they charge a lot of money for that service. And so I'm sure the cruise line transfers will continue to be a thing. So that's where we are with Magical Express. What's interesting is that I don't know that Mears knew Disney was making this Magical Express announcement last week, because they quickly had to come out with a statement that said, we are Mears and we will continue to provide bus transportation. That was a reactionary response. I don't think they were ready for Disney to make this announcement. I don't know that they even knew that Disney had decided not to renew their contract. So that was really interesting to see Mears have to come out and try to reassure people that there will be transportation from the airport. It just won't be paid for by Disney.
So Jason, I had a very different experience with Magical Express. I used it every time I took a trip. I mean, it was something that I counted on every single time. So I definitely will miss it. I don't disagree with you. It has to be purely a mathematical ROI decision to do it. One thing that I think is a bit different than the past. I know that there are a lot of analysts who believe that they created Magical Express in order to keep people on site, to get revenue from souvenirs and from restaurants. But now in the age of Uber, I think most people were in the past, they would have rented a car for transport. Now they will just rely on Uber. So they'll be in the same situation. Even, they'll be sitting on site without a car. They'll still be more likely to eat on site, to shop on site. So for Disney, I think honestly, it's probably a win-win situation. Unless there are a significant number of Disney loyalists who just decide that they're not going to continue to stay on site because of the loss of perks. But honestly, as much as it upsets me, I know I'll still be booking my trips and still going. So I'm not sure if there is any negative impact to Disney.
There might not be. And,
certainly from us, there's no negative or very little negative impact. I mean, the very first time I visited Disney in 1974, we flew down on Eastern Airlines. Ever since then, especially as the family has grown and moved around, we've driven because there were eventually 6 of us, and flying 6 people to Florida is kind of costly. So we had our own car with our own stuff, packed to the gills, of course, with all of our travel stuff. So we never actually used Magical Express. In the past, probably, 10 or 12 years, we have flown down, but because we had friends and relatives and we wanted to go visit them, and we always rented a car anyway. And the only time we really used Magical Express is when we traveled in shifts. Part of the family would go down, rent the car, or drive down and have the car, and then the other couple people would just fly into the airport, take Magical Express, and magically appear at the cabin or room or wherever we were staying. It's a royal pain to have to drive to the airport, wait in the cell lot or wherever, and then, for the flight to come in, and then drive all the way back with the people. But so we'll miss that for sure. I wonder mostly about, people who want the package experience. You arrive at the airport and you're philosophically or effectively, your vacation begins then. You're immediately, greeted by a silhouette of Mickey when you go to Magical Express's desk, and from then on you see the movies and it just starts sooner. And now, as many people in the chat have said, you have to collect your luggage, you have to collect your family, you have to go get something to eat, then you have to go find your car or an Uber or a taxi or your shared van or whatever it is. Then that's just kills some of the experience, I think. And the other group of people, I don't know, international people. When I travel internationally, I love having a host on the other end that can kind of help me and guide me around. When I used to travel for business, we would always have the local guy on the other end to, borrow his car, or he would have the car ready for us or whatever. Driving on the right or the other, side of the road, and all that sort of thing for people coming to Florida. And we won't get into the discussion of Floridian drivers and the Floridian roads, but that can be literally painful.
Notice
to be
there's no
that.
Floridians on the panel tonight. That was on purpose.
Smooth move. So for me, that's the biggest group that I think might be negatively impacted by the kind of the package of having Magical Express. Now they have to pay attention to all those arrangements, or their travel agent does, all on their own.
Yeah, that's a good point. Certainly, I think international travelers are much less apt to rent a car. But then again, international travelers, for the most part, are much more likely to have a travel agent. And so if the travel agent's got to book the package anyway, then the only difference is really that you're not looking for some guy with a Mickey sign at the airport. You're looking for some guy with a Mears sign.
Yeah, or someone with your misspelled name on a
Yeah,
on
right.
a
On a
iPad
whiteboard
or something.
or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. But that's true, and
I do
it's
love it.
also.
I we use it every time we visit, so I will miss it. But I also wonder too. I thought the exact same thing, Jason, when you said it. I was like, did the PR team not say anything to Mears? Like, did they not know?
I don't
It
think they
just
did.
seemed so.
What
I don't
PR
think they
team?
did.
What is this PR team you're talking about? I don't think any of them work there anymore.
I know. I also think it's going to be great business for. They're going to love it, but I think it's going to make it. It's going to make that airport that just the traffic is going to be even zanier with all
Man.
the.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Uber,
Yeah.
it's going
Yeah.
to be craziness.
I think for sure Uber has absolutely played a role in the demise of Magical Express.
I completely agree.
Because it does make it that much easier to leave property and go to Universal for a day without having to rent a car. So it's very possible that Disney had seen that happening and realized that the expense for Magical Express that was designed to keep people on property just wasn't making that happen anymore. And so that's very true. Certainly at Disneyland, whenever I would visit Disneyland, there was a Disneyland Express bus that was very similar to Magical Express, although obviously it was run by a third-party company, but it was, contracted with Disney to have the logos on the side and stuff. That service stopped. That was before the pandemic that service stopped. And then there was a Super Shuttle service, which was kind of the king of airport transportation in LA. And Super Shuttle went out of business basically directly because of Uber. I used to take Super Shuttle all the time. Like every time I visited Disneyland, I would take Super Shuttle because it's cheap, and it was it was very timely because there was always somebody waiting to use it. So they put, a couple different parties in the van. Super Shuttle was essentially the next best thing to Magical Express because it was almost free. It was really cheap, and it was very convenient. So, that is another service that's directly impacted by the prominence of Uber now and Lyft. So yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it too.
Makes me a little sad. But
Yeah. Changing times. I mean,
yeah.
one of the advantages is, it's a double-edged sword. You have the convenience of being able to call a car whenever you need one, but on the other hand, anytime you need a car, you have to call one. So it's always there's pluses and minuses.
I agree with what you said about it's when you. I know that for me personally, when you get on the Magical Express, you felt like you were in the bubble, and now vacation starts. So I will miss that. I'm not going to feel that when I get in an Uber.
I'm sure that Uber drivers and rental car companies are cheering, though. This is going to be a huge boom for them and their increased revenue recurring.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Although rental car companies might be too late for them. Like Hertz declared bankruptcy way back a couple months ago. I usually rent from Hertz, but they're in trouble to some extent. So I think just the problem is that nobody at this point really knows what vacation traffic is going to look like and when it's going to get back to some semblance of what it was, before 2020. And there's really a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's the biggest problem with all of this. There's nothing to say that Disney's not going to bring back Magical Express in some fashion as a paid service. There's still minivans, but minivans have not come back, and I don't think they're going to come back, and they've certainly laid off all the minivan drivers, so taking a minivan back to the airport really isn't a feasible thing anymore either. But even before that, before Magical Express, there were a lot of limo services that would come get your family in a limo and take you right to the hotel, and that was more expensive than than Mears, but it was also a personal shuttle, and no one, you didn't have to share it with anyone else, and they came right when you needed them, and they would stop at the grocery store if you wanted to. Plus you got to travel in a limo or a town car, which was pretty cool. Kids back in my day were all excited to travel in those fancy cars. So that's, that's probably still going to be a thing. I'm sure there's still some companies that offer those limo services. And so, I think nobody really knows what's going to happen. It wouldn't surprise me that there's a Disney service that's paid that replaces Magical Express. What I think is really dumb of Disney is to announce that Magical Express is ending before they have a suitable replacement. Right? They're kind of like leaving. They're kind of leaving their guests out in the breeze and not knowing what's going on.
It seems to be the standard operating process now.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right, Rich.
Sorry, Rob.
So my dear friend, person familiar with the matter, told me that when Disney had the conversations with Mears and let them know that they were ending the contract, that Mears was ready to immediately publish information, and that Disney was scrambling to get out a press release prior to them making the announcement themselves, so they controlled the flow of information. But if it was Disney's choice, they would not have made the announcement this early on.
Huh.
Oh, so Disney was afraid that Mears was going to basically spill the beans.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, they were going to.
So if perhaps Disney has a alternative solution in the works, but there just wasn't time to coordinate and make the announcement simultaneously with the demise of Disney Magical Express.
Well, that just goes to show you how poorly Disney is involved in some of these contract negotiations, that they don't put Mears under an NDA before they start negotiations or whatnot. That's, again, maybe they furloughed half of their lawyers too. I don't know.
I think you're right, though, that they're probably going to have something that's just going to be an add-on, that'll be a charge.
Yeah, or maybe it's something that's complementary with, if you have a deluxe hotel at $500 or $700 a night, and you're charging those who are in the moderate or budget hotels for a service. There's lots of options.
Right. That's really interesting, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure people aren't going to be stranded at the airport, put it that way. There's plenty of services, whether it be Uber or Lyft or limo services or Mears itself. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of services that are going to swoop in here and fill the void, because if there's one thing that I've learned over 40 years of going to Walt Disney World, it's that if there's a service that people want that Disney doesn't provide, there's plenty of other people that are willing to come in and provide that service, whether it be stroller rentals, scooter rentals, wheelchair rentals, whatever. There's always companies willing to come in and take advantage of the oversight by Disney and provide a service. And sometimes they get shut out of the market in a year or two after Disney comes out with their own service. Sometimes Disney has these preferred partners now where you can't deliver to the hotel unless you're one of their preferred stroller partners, and that has shut a lot of companies out. But so there's always a bit of danger with that kind of service, but at the same time, there's definitely a need, and there's definitely a way to do it and service the guests and make money doing it.
Philosophically, just for a second, I mean, the reason that Disney World was designed the way it was is to not repeat the mistakes of Disneyland, where you had all of these outside services encroaching on, quote unquote, the Disney bubble, and the Magical Express was part of that reach, that bubble, that you didn't want to have any old shuttle drop you off at Disney. You wanted to be trapped in the Disney bubble as soon as possible. And so bit by bit, the philosophy of, we have the space, let's grab them as soon as they touch down, is getting eroded. I mean, once you set people free, naturally they're going to want to do other things.
Yeah, I think to some extent that's true. To some extent, though, I think that was a problem for Disney, because when people were on Disney's Magical Express, they expected the driver to be a Disney cast member, and they weren't. And I remember when Magical Express first launched, there was plenty of people saying, these Disney drivers are real rough folks. How did they even get hired by Disney? And the secret, of course, that Disney doesn't want you to know is that they're not hired by Disney,
Right.
and they're not run by Disney. And that's honestly, I think, the reason why minivan drivers were Disney employees, and that wasn't outsourced, because Disney needed to make sure that the guest felt comfortable in a car that was a Disney vehicle operated by a Disney cast member. But certainly, I remember when Magical Express first started, there were all these people talking about the drivers and how rude they were and this and that. So, that goes both ways. Disney wants to have you in the bubble, but they don't want to pay for it. And so
They want us to pay for it.
Well, yeah, right. Maybe the other thing, though, is everybody's talking about this Disney bubble. Maybe since the NBA bubble, this bubble thing isn't such a great idea anymore.
It has the wrong connotation.
It sure does. It sure does at this point.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we can guess. I wouldn't be surprised if Disney looks at, the $250 single one-way trip to and from the airport in their own driver with their own minivan, and thinks that might be part of the new solution. Because, that in a spreadsheet probably looks much better than a bus subcontracted out to somebody else.
It does, but then again, there's only so many minivans. And most of them need to be driving around property. So the number of minivans that can absolutely be used to run back and forth to the airport, I think, is limited.
Yeah, yeah. They'll just replace them all with the electric Escalades.
Also, I think the people familiar to pay that price are also limited.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
Yep, that's true.
All right, any other thoughts about Magical Express? Looking at the chat. I think mostly, for the most part, the chat was kind of agreeing with us. But what's going to be interesting is when this train thing actually happens, how much the train is going to cost, what people are going to do with their luggage, and how they're going to get from Disney Springs to the hotel. Those are going to be three, I think, key points to determine whether this train is going to work or not. And
Jason, I'm sure, I know you fly in and out of MCO frequently, but where the train is going to be departing is far away. It's not. You're not jumping off your plane, your concourse. You're getting off your plane, you're going downstairs, you're getting luggage, and then you're hiking a far way out to get to that. So,
and I don't know. I assume there's got to be some kind of shuttle to that train terminal. But yeah,
I think it's going to be one of the trains like they have in the concourses that take you out. It'll be one of those trains. But
the APMs.
It'll still take. It'll probably add 45 minutes to an hour to your trip.
You got to get your luggage, then get to the train, get on the train. Who knows how often the train is going to run? So you have all that. That's certainly going to add time, and that's why, kind of in my case, I grab my luggage, I walk across the street literally, and go into a Hertz car, and I'm in their gold plan, so I don't have to stop at the desk or anything. I can be from getting off the plane to Disney World in half an hour, as long as there's not some holdup with the luggage.
You made a good point about frequency. Those high-speed rail trains are not inexpensive. I can't imagine that there will be just a continuous number of trains going back and forth.
Right.
It could be a few hours.
And the way that the line works, it goes from Miami to the airport to Disney to Tampa, and so it's not like there's going to be 5 trains that just run back and forth between Disney and the airport, while these other high-speed trains are making the whole route between Miami and Tampa. So I don't know how that system's going to work. Maybe they're going to have double tracks between Disney and the airport just for a normal train. I think like that's what I ride Amtrak all the time between Philly and New York City. And, there's the Acela high speed service, and then there's the regular old Amtrak service that's like half the price that takes 10 minutes more. That's what I ride 9 times out of 10. But it uses the same tracks, and honestly, between Philly and New York, the high speed train isn't that much faster. So it's my guess is that it may very well be some system like that where you're not having the same trains that transport people from the airport to Springs. It's not going to be the same trains that run on the rest of the system. It'll just be the same tracks. Somebody in the chat, this almost sounds like how people in France get to Disneyland Paris. That's absolutely the case. My trip to Disneyland Paris, I was staying in a hotel in Paris, and I took the Paris subway to the train that runs out to Marne-la-Vallée and drops you off right at the doorstep of Disneyland Paris. I mean, to be honest, that station at Disneyland Paris is way more convenient than the station at Disney Springs is going to be. It's going to be like if all of the Disney hotels were the Disney Springs hotels, like the Buena Vista Palace and stuff over there. That's what the train station at Disneyland Paris is like. So where you could actually
300 yards. I mean, it's not a long walk.
Right. So if you could envision walking from Disney Springs to the downtown Disney hotels on Hotel Plaza Boulevard, if you could imagine that scenario, that's what it's like in Paris. The problem is that most people that are going to be taking the train to Disney Springs then got to get to a Disney hotel somewhere else, not right there at Springs. Is there going to be chocolate on the train? I don't know. Apparently some people were watching last week, though. Let's see. So I think, I mean, in terms of Magical Express, I think people have options. I think the real big story here is that Disney is cutting a service that was free, not replacing it with anything. At the same time, charging for parking at the resorts, and so if you rent a car, now you have to pay for parking on top of the rental car. That's a pretty poor move. And so, all this is really very not guest-friendly, I would say.
So, Jason, do you have any sense of what the cost, like per guest was for that? I mean, by the time you pay meals, you pay the bag service. I mean, is it $100 per person? Is it $75 per person? What kind of incremental, profit is Disney going to look to get by doing this?
I don't know. I know the time this was in the early 2000s, or probably mid 2000s, like 04, 05. The time that I went and took a limo service, I believe that was like $150 for up to 6 people. So that was pretty reasonable. Obviously, that included, hauling your luggage to the hotel too. And so I don't know how much the Mears was. I know Super Shuttle at Disneyland was usually like $20 a person each way, or it was like $32 if you booked it round trip. That was pretty cheap too. That was for a shared van service. So
the bag service used to operate out of Seattle and Boston and a couple other markets, and they charged $25. Obviously, Disney got a substantial discount, I'm sure, but they charged $25 per delivery for bags.
Okay.
So again, I mean, that's, if you look at 1,000 or 2,000 people a day coming through that service, it's not a small amount. It could represent $1 million of incremental profit to Disney a week.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt that at all. Um, and the question is, have the room rates, or will the room rates going to change now that Magical Express is going away? Well, my guess is yes, they're going to go up because they always do,
They
and
do.
so you're going to lose out on a free or no additional cost perk, and you're going to have to pay more for your travel, and Disney doesn't really care.
Because they know we'll pay it.
Yeah. Yeah, so Andy asked in the chat, does this eliminate resort bag check? Well, I talked about that before. That's the bag service, and bags is a service that is not operating anymore. It was separate from Magical Express, but it really was marketed to be one and the same. But yeah, that service is not running anymore, and I don't know when or if it will come back. So, all right, let's move to something a little more exciting. The end of Extra Magic Hours. Who can be excited about that? So the Extra Magic Hours benefit was something that was open to Disney resort guests only, and most people looked at it as you could get into the one park an hour early. Which was true, and that's been happening for years and years and years now. I mean, that's been happening for 25, 30 years, getting into the park.
But previously it was 2 hours or 3 hours. I mean, there were much longer periods
Well,
of time earlier on.
it used to be an hour early or 3 hours later closing. So I can remember nights when Magic Kingdom closed at 10 and Extra Magic Hours lasted till 1 in the morning, and those were fantastic days. Those were my favorite. I didn't always get up to take advantage of the morning Extra Magic Hours, but I definitely took advantage of the evening Extra Magic Hours. And when evening Extra Magic Hours first started, those were a newer thing. Originally, Magic Hours were just in the morning, but when the evening one started, that was really the only way to go into Animal Kingdom at night. And so that was a super special thing to be able to stay 2 hours later, 3 hours later at Animal Kingdom and enjoy the park at night, which was something that under most circumstances you could never do. So again, that was my favorite, that evening Extra Magic Hours, whether it was like 1 a.m. at Epcot or whether it was just till like 10 o'clock at Animal Kingdom in the dark. Those are my favorite. But here's another perk that's technically going away. They're just changing it a bit. What they're doing is now coming out with Disney Resort Early. I forget what the technical name of it is. Somebody will correct me. I read it right before the show, and now I can't remember anymore. It basically lets resort guests into any park of their choosing every day 30 minutes before scheduled opening time. And so instead of an hour early in one park, you get 30 minutes early in all the parks, whichever one you want. And so this, I think, is actually a genius move. I don't like the loss of the nighttime Extra Magic Hours, but as far as the morning Extra Magic Hours, this is a genius move, because normally when I travel, I never took advantage of the morning Extra Magic Hours, because I was usually out late and didn't want to get up that early. So the way that I planned my trip was that say today Magic Kingdom has morning Extra Magic Hours. That's going to make Magic Kingdom much more crowded. I will go to Magic Kingdom tomorrow, because anybody who got up super early to rope drop Magic Kingdom today isn't going to do it again tomorrow. And so I would always visit the park the day after its morning Extra Magic Hours. And that way I didn't have to get up extra early. I could get there at the normal time. I would still rope drop, and it would be much less crowded than if I went to the morning Extra Magic Hours. And so that was my plan. I've done that for 10 years now, plan my park days like that. And it's always worked out well. But now with a half an hour early at any park, that absolutely spreads out the crowds. So instead of the Magic Kingdom being extra crowded on the day it has morning extra magic hours, now every park is kind of spread out because you can go wherever you want and do the extra magic hours. And so, to me, from Disney's point of view, this is a genius move because it spreads out the crowds. A half an hour is nothing because all the cast members are there anyway. They often open the turnstiles before park opening time. And so to let, they would always let people in, like anybody who had a dining reservation at Cinderella Royal Table. They would have to go in early and let them into the park. So all of that infrastructure to let resort guests into the park a half an hour early is already there. It's already in place. It's just now going to happen a half an hour ahead of park opening instead of an hour. But to me, I think that's a great way to spread out the crowds. Certainly, if they're going to continue the concept of park passes being required for park entry, then this is almost a necessity, because if you have a park pass and the extra magic hours schedule isn't published yet, how are you going to know whether you can take advantage of it or not? And so this means that whatever park you have a park pass for, you'll be able to take advantage of these extra magic minutes, I'll call it. And so I think this, even though I don't like the loss of the evening extra magic hours, I think for the morning extra magic hours, this makes fantastic sense. It spreads out the crowds. It really screws the people that are off-site, because you could do the plan that I did where I would go to the park the day after it has morning extra magic hours. You could do that if you stayed off-site. Now that's totally out the window, and off-site people have no way to get to a park that's not already full of Disney resort guests for half an hour before they get there, because it will happen at every park every day. So this is a huge disadvantage to people that stay off property. In the past, Disney has marketed these things as benefits to people who stay on property. But now not only is this a benefit to people that stay on property, it's really a detriment to those who stay off property. And I think that's honestly the biggest outcome of this extra magic hour thing, is that the people that stay off property have no possibility now of showing up at a park at rope drop and running to an attraction and being the first in line, because every park will be full of Disney resort guests every day. And that's a very big change for people that stay off property.
When they're distributing it across all the parks, perhaps there won't be that large number of people there, so maybe it won't impact those. Definitely, when they were having it just at one park, I could definitely see how that might keep people from being able to take advantage of road drop. But if you look at the number of Disney guests who are staying at park, who are going to each of the 4 parks, plus those who are willing to get up super early to make it, perhaps it won't be as big of an impact on those who are not staying on site.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it will be a smaller overall impact at each park each day. There'll be less people taking advantage of it, but it will be there'll still be people there, which means locals and people staying off property are not going to be able to rope drop and get on attractions without a wait.
Yeah, another example of the APs, the local APs, getting screwed.
Yep, for sure.
Normally, I'd jump in and say something exciting and pithy, but you basically said it all, so I don't have that much to add. Our strategy has changed over time. We used to be big evening EMHs, and we've slowly moved to the morning, and we've kind of probably, evenly split between staying usually at a Disney Springs area hotel or on site. So I don't know. We'll see how this changes our habits.
Yeah, we never take advantage of the morning ones. We used to with the evening, but we never do the morning because we're always out too
Yeah.
late.
And so I think certainly before COVID, there was definitely a path towards the number of paid nighttime events that were happening at all the parks.
Yeah.
Disney After Hours and Villains After Hours and everything. So this may be the case that Disney's essentially just, going to have more of these evening
The hard tick.
hard ticket events. Yeah, I mean, I think they had a lot before. It's not like they couldn't have them because the park had evening extra magic hours, because each park only really had evening extra magic hours one night a week. So they just had to schedule the evening extra magic hours around the hard ticket events. So I don't know that they're going to have more hard ticket events. I think people may be more willing to pay for these hard ticket events that they do have, because it's the only way to stay in the park late. But considering that some of these after hours events that are $129 or more are so poorly attended because they're expensive. I went to a morning whatever it was, extra magic morning. I can't remember what it was called. I went to a morning hard ticket event and it was the one where you had breakfast at Cosmic Rays, and then you could do Tomorrowland and Fantasyland, and it was like there was nobody there. There must have been there couldn't have been more than 1,000 people there, and 1,000 people sounds like a lot, but it's really nothing in the Magic Kingdom. So I mean, if these after hours events or the early morning magic, there you go, the early morning magic, if they actually make Disney money, I think they're great events. I mean, if you can afford them, they're spectacular. You have a nice hour in the parks without any crowds. You can do whatever rides you want with no wait, at least the ones that are offered for the event. But I mean, it was glorious. It was a glorious time to be there. The closest thing is that I could think to that early morning magic was like, the day Disney reopened in July, and there was nobody there. That's pretty much what it was like.
So I don't know about you guys, but I haven't seen any specifics in terms of when this is going to start, or which rides will be guaranteed to be open when the early mornings start. I know the past few times, especially in California, that I've stayed on site and gone into the parks early, a significant number of the rides weren't even open. Yeah. So I don't know if that's like a labor cost piece that's there, but it's not going to be too exciting if Runaway Railroad isn't available, or the Pandora rides aren't available. That'll be a big piece of it too.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, it's going to be. I can't see that Runaway Railway wouldn't be part of the Magic Hours. I could see Star Wars Land not being part of it, but Runaway Railway and Toy Story Land, I think, almost would have to be.
Can you imagine if it was in that first, half hour, you could essentially be guaranteed to be able to ride Rise of the Resistance?
That's precisely why it's not going to be. I mean, they can't keep Rise of the Resistance running for like 11 hours a day. How are they going to run it for more than that? Especially for the nighttime. I think at some point in time, Rise of the Resistance is going to wear off on people. Like the last time that I went to Studios, I was at Studios last Sunday. I woke up at 7, tried to get a boarding group, didn't get it. I just rolled over, went back to bed. It was like, okay, fine. I've ridden Rise of the Resistance 7 or 8 times now. Obviously in the last year since it opened. That's enough for me. It's not something I have to do every trip now anymore. It's kind of gone into the bucket with most other rides where I'll ride it if there's not a long wait. but I'm not going to go out of my way or, wait an hour to ride it. So if I don't get a boarding pass, I don't get a boarding pass. It's no big deal. I'll try again next time, kind of thing. So I don't know if that's the case with everybody, if that's sort of happening across the board now, that mindset shift, now that I've ridden it a couple times and, it's starting to break down and things aren't working anymore. That's really the benefit to ride it right when it opens, is that most of the time, most things work. And 2-3 weeks into it, stuff starts breaking and it doesn't get fixed. So, to me, I can see between park passes and morning, the 30-minute morning extra magic hours, and people getting sort of tired of Rise of the Resistance. I can see it. I can see them getting rid of the boarding pass system at some point. I just don't know when. The problem is, once COVID is over and things are getting back to normal, there's a whole lot of people that haven't been at all. And their sole purpose for going is to ride Rise of the Resistance. And so that, I think, will be something to contend with. But for me, it's like, whatever. I mean, Runaway Railway's already like that for me, and I've only ridden it 3 times. But it's just not that good. So, yeah, I don't know. But I think the one thing that I'm very worried about is that in Tokyo, they have a thing akin to morning extra magic hours that they call Happy 15. And it's only 15 minutes. And I just hope Walt Disney World doesn't get wind of that and take the 30 minutes down to 15, because that would be...
And then charge us $100 for it.
Yeah, it's the Happy 15 is like, it really only gets you into the park before everybody else and on one ride. So, I mean, if you're going to Tokyo Disneyland and the first thing you want to do is ride Pooh's Honey Hunt, it gets you onto Pooh's Honey Hunt before anybody else. But by the time you get off of Pooh's Honey Hunt, the rest of the park is full. And so...
Jason, is that for resort guests, or is that a pay extra?
It's only for guests that are staying at a Tokyo Disney Resort hotel. So it's only the Tokyo Disneyland Hotel or Miracosta or the Ambassador or the Toy Story Hotel. It doesn't even apply to the, Good Neighbor type hotels that are on the monorail loop. It doesn't even apply to those. So it's very, very limited. And it's totally not
Disney
worth the extra cost to stay at one of those hotels.
Did Disney say if that's going to apply to the extra 30 minutes is going to apply to the Good Neighbor hotels as well, or is that only the Disney resorts?
I
haven't seen that clarified.
I have to think that it's probably the same as before, which means it was only the Hilton and Disney Springs and not the other ones. That would be my guess.
Swan.
What's that? And the Swan. Well, yeah, then the Swan and Dolphin, right, yes. But that would be my guess if I had to make a guess. They haven't made any announcements specifically. So that's the end of Extra Magic Hours, like I said. The evening Extra Magic Hours, it depends, because I really like the evening ones. I usually didn't do it to go on rides because the rides were super crowded, because pretty much anybody can do evening Extra Magic Hours. You don't have to get up early. You're already there. And so usually evening Extra Magic Hours was way crowded, more crowded than during the day for some of the rides. And that, so I just enjoyed walking around the parks in the dark. That was my favorite. And to be honest, that was one of my favorite things about this trip my last trip in December and the one last week, where, it gets dark early and you have a fair amount of time to walk around the parks in the dark, and it's really nice. I really enjoy it.
I like it in the dark too. It's a completely different experience. So that was something that I kind of missed when we went in October, because most of the parks were closed at like 5-ish.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yep.
no, you miss the ambiance. It's just a different experience.
It absolutely is. All right. Anybody else with thoughts about extra magic hours? All right.
Nope.
Then let's get to the big deal in my mind this week, and that is the disaster that Disney is causing with the Disneyland Annual Pass program. So news came out Thursday that Disneyland was canceling everyone's annual pass, refunding people prorated refunds, and essentially doing completely away with an annual pass holder program altogether. And so a lot of people, there are some people that are suspecting that maybe this means that the parks are going to reopen soon and they can't handle the influx of pass holders wanting to go, so they had to get rid of the annual passes. Heather's shaking her head no, because she knows what it's like in California. I don't think the parks.
But you can go get the vaccine.
Yeah,
you could go get a vaccine there.
Yeah, right. You can go there and get a vaccine. So I think my thought is this, and I think this is probably something that most people haven't thought of. But anyone that had a Premier Passport, the pass that was good at Disneyland and Walt Disney World, so those of us that had Disney World annual passes got basically 4 months added to our pass date. So my pass would have expired actually this week, but now it expires in April. I got 4 months added to the pass. Disneyland, if you had a Premier Passport, because Disneyland is still closed, they were just keep extending your Premier Passport, which means those people were getting into Walt Disney World for free for an indefinite period of time, because they couldn't change the expiry date of the Disney World half of the pass and have it be different than the Disneyland half of the pass. And so they would just keep extending the expiry dates. And so, people were going to get, a year added on to their pass, and that whole year they would get into Walt Disney World for free. And that was becoming a problem the longer that Disneyland stayed closed. And so I think that is one of the biggest reasons that they just decided to cancel the annual passport program altogether, was because they didn't know how to handle these Premier Passes. Now, granted, there's not many people that have Premier Passes, but, that's been a problem. And so now Premier Passes are going to expire at the end of March, and people can renew them into a Walt Disney World annual pass, but the Premier Passes will be no more as of right now.
So, Jason, I think I have a slightly different point of view here. I think this was more about Disney's risk management team coming up and saying, perhaps we are going to be legally liable for holding on to the cash associated with all these passes and not letting people in, and going ahead and liquidating it and giving people their money back was just a way to keep themselves from getting sued, honestly.
I think you're right to some extent. I mean, that's a problem in Florida, and it's still a problem in Florida. And there's people that had Walt Disney World annual passes that still haven't gotten refunds, or they finally got them like last week, right, Rich?
Yeah. Well, my wife got hers almost immediately in, when did we say it was? August, I think it was. And then I got mine in December. So yeah, there was quite a wait for the refund, and I had to call and have several people look into it before it actually started to roll back.
So I agree with you, Rob. I think that's a problem. I think that's absolutely a problem. I think probably they're more likely to face this sort of liability in California than in Florida. There sure is many more lawyers in California ready to sue. So I think that's a very valid point. Um,
I
but
agree with
I
that.
think the people that think, I mean, and it's also a valid point that, having a million annual pass holders is going to be a problem when the parks finally reopen at some very limited capacity. That's
Yeah.
absolutely going to be a problem. I don't think
I would
that is correlated with the cancellation of the annual pass program. Um, so I don't think that means the parks are open anytime soon.
I don't think they're going to open anytime soon either. And I do think that with because there are 7 tiers, like there are 7 different kind of passes that you can have out here, and all of them have different rules, different blackout dates, all of it. I think it would just be a logistical nightmare for them when they try to open up and with limited capacity. And it's like what is it? It's like 70% are local and 30% are tourists for us out here.
Yeah.
And so there would be so many people who would be expecting to like be able to get in who couldn't. So then more logistics that, they don't want to deal with. I also don't know that that it wouldn't be something that they would have been interested in doing had COVID not happened. Just
I've
because I
heard
feel like
that.
they overextended themselves when they added like the payment plan and everything, and that's when you get up to like
So,
a million pass holders who can just go in when they want to go in, and it got so crowded. And so I think it was a smart move. I don't think the parks are gonna open anytime soon. It's bad here in Southern California, really really bad with COVID, and Newsom is not gonna let them open.
yeah,
But
I agree.
what were you
Managing
gonna say?
crowds is going to be one of the biggest opportunities. I think when the program does come back, it's going to look very, very different than the
Yeah.
existing
Mem-
program. Whether it's go ahead.
they're calling it a membership. They're gonna when they come back, they're calling it like it's gonna be a membership kind of thing. So I'm very curious as to what that's gonna look like. But I
I
think it'll
think the
probably be more
membership
expensive. And
thing is just a different way to call it like a monthly payment plan, right? But it's a membership program that you're going to be in and you don't ever have to renew. Like it just charges you every month until you stop it. So whereas the annual pass had a defined date, and if you didn't renew your annual pass, they stopped charging you. I think this membership plan is again a genius idea from Disney to just charge people every month and make it difficult for them to stop. It's like when you call up the cable company and try to cancel your cable TV. Um, they make you jump through 1,000 hoops, and even then, sometimes the charges don't stop, right? That's really the next evolution of this thing is to get away from calling it an annual pass and really just calling it like a Disney Club pass that is not tied to any calendar year. It's just you keep paying and you get to keep going.
I think that I think they've been wanting to wipe it out, and I think that they can now.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That especially the cheaper passes, the SoCal Select and stuff, were definitely
Yeah.
things that they wanted to get rid of. And I mean, there was a huge uproar with the annual pass program in like 2004, 2005, when it was like out of hand, and they jacked because it used to be really cheap. Like a Disneyland annual pass used to be like $300. Um,
Hmm.
and then they jacked up the price, like doubled it overnight, and that was to try to reduce the ranks of annual pass holders. And then they came out with these SoCal Select things that are like $300, and the ranks of the annual pass holders swelled again. And now it's like they don't learn. There's nobody that's
Hmm.
worked at Disney long enough to realize that everything they're facing has happened before, and they've had to deal with it. And there's no one there that remembers when it happened and how they dealt with it, and there's no one there that remembers what led to it and why they had a problem. And so they just
No one
do
took
the
notes.
same things again and run into the same problem again. And that's exactly what's happening here, is that there's too many pass holders because the passes are too cheap, and they need to come up with a better way to manage attendance and still make money. And so this membership program, I think, is going to be effectively the top of the line pass that has no blackout dates, and as long as you keep paying, you can keep going, and there's not going to be any passes with blackout dates anymore.
I mean, but that's
Or is it,
crazy
or
too.
are they? Go ahead. You go ahead.
They have like 1 million pass holders. It's crazy, and we've been there, in the parks, and I said like I think all million are here today. It feels like that sometimes. Every single millionth person is in the park that day.
Every
They
weekend.
just are every weekend, and holidays, forget it, because then, oof. But
Like
yeah, I
honestly,
think
I
they
won't even.
overextend.
I don't go to Disneyland during the weekend anymore. If I'm going to go, it has to be
No,
during the week because it's miserable.
yeah, I agree. We used to go every single year on Christmas Day. Obviously, we didn't this year, but and it was just chaos. But for us, it was fine because we could just walk around and sit and not. It wouldn't be, we have to get on every ride. So we could kind of relax that day. But for people who are just going there, whether it's their first time or whatever, that would be a horrible experience.
It's so interesting because with a annual pass and it being so close, sometimes I would just, I see a cheap flight, I'll jump on a plane and fly down to Disneyland for a couple days, and I think that we'll be seeing much less of those kind of spur of the moment trips to Disneyland for them in the past because I think they're going to put things in place that are going to keep those from happening. I
There
could
was
see a membership being you no longer get in for free. You get to get in for a very cheap price, or something to that effect.
That's a good
discount.
point.
I think
Yep.
they have the one of the categories they used to have was Flex Pass, I think it's called, where you always had to reserve it. And I think that will probably be an element to the annual passes when they do come back in whatever way, shape, or form that they come back.
Yeah. No, but the idea of, you pay a monthly membership fee to join the club, but then you still have to pay 20 or 30 or $40 to get in the park on any given day. I mean, it's better than $120, but it makes you reevaluate, whether it's worthwhile to just hop on a plane and go for 3 days because you can get in for free versus, well, now I have to pay $100 to get in for those 3 days. Is it really worth it anymore? And I mean
I
that.
really like the actual SoCal families. I mean, if it's during on a Saturday, taking a family of four to Disney is pretty cheap. But if you're having to pay $20 a person, all of a sudden now it costs you $80 to go to
Right.
Disneyland. Maybe you wouldn't do it as
Yeah.
frequently.
Yep. And I mean, those prices could absolutely be uh, tiered based on the time of year or the day of the week.
Yeah.
That's what Walt Disney World is doing now with their passes. Is you pick the day of the week, you pick the day when the pass starts, and that's how they calculate your price. So I could absolutely see the membership program being like, $20 on a Tuesday and $30 on a Friday and $50 on a Saturday. That would make sense. I think the problem that Disneyland is facing, and I think Florida faces this problem too, but Disneyland is it's a lot worse, is that people that actually go there as a destination on vacation have a much worse time because of the crowds, right?
Oh yeah.
Like there's so many locals that go all the time that there's no way that you can go there for a week's vacation and enjoy yourself with all of these crowds. It's crazy. And that happens in Florida, but a lot more of the people in Florida are the vacationers than the locals.
Right.
So at Disneyland, it's just sometimes it's just horrendous to deal with the
And because it's so
crowds,
small,
and like you
so much
can't
smaller,
move.
feel it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's not. I remember thinking when I had first come out to Los Angeles, because I had been exposed to Walt Disney World first, and I came out to Los Angeles, and I was like, it's just so much smaller, and there's no room for the people,
Yeah, I mean, being
and there's
so much
so much
smaller
less
is
to do.
really nice.
Yeah,
It's
at
a
times,
really charming place to be, but
right?
not
But people
with
are on top of each other.
not with a million other people in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and I
there's
could
just not
definitely
as
see a
much.
reservation system. Go ahead. Go
Yeah,
right ahead, Heather. I'm
me
sorry.
too. No, I completely agree with you. I could see a reservation system. I was just going to say there's just not as much to do. It's not spread out. You can't go play miniature golf. You can go be in like downtown Anaheim. It's you can have you can I don't about Anaheim. But you can have a resort day if you're staying at one of the resorts, I guess, and hang out by the pool and stuff, but it's just not I don't think it's conducive, but
I definitely see a reservation system in Disneyland being there at least until the end of 2022. It'll be around significantly longer than the reservation system in Orlando.
Rob, you think that Disneyland's going to open before 2022?
I was just gonna say I was just I,
Hey, I'm not allowed to go back into my office until at least September. So,
Yeah.
you never know. But I am hopeful that Disneyland will be open before at least holiday of next year,
Yeah.
of this year, I guess. So,
I
So
hope
I'm being reminded in the chat, please hit the like button on the show. We have 340 viewers right now, which is great. It's higher than we normally do. So, that's exciting. But please hit the like button so we can get some more likes, and hit the bell for notifications and all that jazz. The other thing I wanted to say. So you were talking about, going to the pool. I guess Heather, you were talking about going to the pool or miniature golf or whatever. I mean, a year and a half ago, I went out to Disneyland for 11 days. And we pretty much went in the parks every day. I mean, we went to Knott's Berry Farm for a couple days, but we went to the parks at Disneyland almost every day of that 11-day trip. And it was still fun. And I mean, it was September, so it wasn't crowded very much. It's a really fun place to be when it's not crowded. But it's also a horrendous place to be when it is crowded.
yeah. Oh, I will say one thing too with the taking away of the AP passes. I don't know like who you guys follow on the Twitter and whatnot, but like Hollywood Studios out Universal Hollywood
Yeah.
out here and Knott's Berry are like throwing such shade
Oh,
at
yeah.
Disney. Such shade.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's Universal does that to Disney World down here.
yeah.
In some
We
cases.
love our pass holders.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, that's what Universal's been doing that in Florida since they reopened, and they are marketing the heck out of annual passes and always making a big deal of the benefits. When Disney cuts pass holder benefits, they made a big deal that, hey, we have water parks open. Remember those things? Water parks? Yeah, so that happens in Florida too. It's really amusing when it happens.
Yeah, it's pretty.
and one thing I don't think we can forget is they're still working on that DVC tower. So you can imagine the extra
Yeah.
influx of DVC members who are coming in too. That's going to make it even more
Right.
overflowing.
But I think also the membership program is going to let them. So, like in Florida, we have park passes, and there's different buckets of park passes. There's annual pass holders, there's resort guests, and there's day ticket guests. And there's 3 different buckets. An annual pass holder bucket always runs out of park passes first, and the other 2 pretty much stay available for the most part. And so I could certainly see the membership thing at Disneyland giving you some sort of preferred access to the park passes when that reservation system actually happens, and something like that along those lines too. So, yeah, I mean, there's a very limited number of resort guests out there, so it's going to be the members or the resort guests or everybody else, basically.
Oh, I'm not going to lie. I'll be waiting in line to buy my DVC there.
Really?
As much as I complain, I'll still do it. Yeah.
Honestly, the Grand Californian DVC is one of my favorites. I've stayed there a couple
It
of
is very
times.
nice. It's very nice.
And we had reservations when they were going to open on December 6th or whatever it was. I had a reservation that night. We'd planned to go out there just because we could, and it was open, and then it got canceled at the last minute. But I know, right? I've never actually before checked in for a flight and then canceled the trip. Usually, if it comes around time to check in for your flight, you're pretty much sure you're going, but not this time.
But here's the thing. We're talking about all these things that are negative, all these poor decisions Disney are making, but I'm still throwing all my money at them.
Well, yeah. I mean, to some extent, like I bought a Universal annual pass this year for the first time ever, and I bought them for my family for the first time ever. And there are a lot of perks at Universal. I mean, they give you like $20 merchandise coupons every time you spend $50, and you get dining discounts and merchandise discounts. And the water park is open, and the water park has early entry for resort guests and pass holders. The problem is with DVC is that the price of DVC now is so high that it's hard to get a return on your investment. 20 years ago when you could buy DVC for $50 a point, it was pretty easy to get a return on your investment. But now that it's like $175 a point, that's a bit harder.
Oh yeah, there are thoughts that the tower at Disneyland will be about $300 a point.
Is it really?
Yeah, $300.
I don't know that it can be $300 a point, and I'll tell you why. People
right now, the direct price is $280 a point for Grand Californian.
$280.
Yeah.
But that's also because Grand Californian is the highest demand of any DVC property. When the tower opens at Disneyland Hotel, it's going to make Grand Californian that much less in demand. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, $300 a point, you really can't get a return on your investment at that point. Like, the great thing about DVC when it first came out 30 years ago was that you could calculate what your price was and how much you were spending for a hotel room. And because the point charts can't change over time, there's no inflation. And so the only inflation that happens with DVC is the point price when you buy in. And that's why when you bought in 20 years ago at $50 a point, that was a great deal. And now at $280 a point, it's not a good deal anymore.
Like Bitcoin.
Say that again, Heather?
No, I just said like Bitcoin.
It's like Bitcoin.
Should have bought it years ago.
I mean, there was a point in time in 2008-ish when Bay Lake Tower was opening that I was seriously looking at the numbers and buying in as an investment, because I was looking at the numbers, and if you could rent out all your points every year, would that cover your cost plus your buy-in price plus make a profit? And I think in 2008 it was probably $130 a point, maybe something, $120 a point, something in that neighborhood. And then it was getting a bit iffy whether you could actually turn a profit and if it would be worthwhile. But so above that, yeah, it's not.
But Jason, you're missing the critical point. It's going to be so pretty.
Well, yeah, of course it is.
And shiny.
Of course it is. But, there's other hotels in California that are pretty and shiny, and maybe they don't come with an hour early entry to Disney California Adventure, but then you just go to Knott's, and you go on the pretty shiny new roller coaster at Knott's.
Knott's is not a substitute for Disney.
It's not, unless you like roller coasters.
And pie.
And pie and fried chicken, yeah.
I've never been to Knott's. Next time.
Knott's is worth going to, absolutely. Especially if you like roller coasters.
Yeah, the roller coasters are fun. I will say that.
But And hey, Knott's has a water park too. Don't forget that.
I don't even remember them having one. I haven't been to Knott's.
It's a little thing, and it's like next to their parking lot. So it's not really huge, but it's more than Disney has in California.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, I think the other question that is a lot of people are having is whether Walt Disney World is going to follow suit and get rid of their annual pass program, because they suspended annual pass sales since like July 12th. I mean, you could actually, when the parks reopened in July, you could actually still buy an annual pass, but they quickly stopped it, and you have not been able to buy an annual pass since then. And that is, there's a couple key questions. One is obviously the annual pass situation in Florida is very different than it is at Disneyland, because maybe there's 1 million pass holders, I don't know, but they go much less often, and there's much more space to spread them across 4 parks. And so there are many less problems with pass holders in Florida than there are in California. And a lot of that has to do with the passes also being more expensive, right? Like we don't have a Central Florida Select pass that costs $200. The cheapest one in Florida is like if you don't count the Epcot After 4 pass, the cheapest one in Florida is still $400 and some dollars. So I think the pricing in Florida for annual passes is more aligned to keep the numbers of pass holders somewhat limited. But you can still renew. People are talking in the chat about renewing. You can still renew annual passes in Florida. You just can't buy new ones.
Honestly, right before COVID, the year before COVID, we were experiencing some of the same ridiculous overcrowdingness at Disney World. So yes. I hope they do make some modifications, because the experience is less. I would be happy to pay more to be in a park that had a lower maximum occupancy. And part of that is that it's not as big of a deal as it is in Disneyland, but the large number of APs in Disney World is a huge contributing factor to Disney World's crowded, especially on the weekends.
I mean, the other problem with Disney World is they close attractions and don't have any replacements. So you have a park like Hollywood Studios that has like half the number of attractions that it should, and then the ones they do have break down all the time. This was before Runaway Railway opened, of course. But there were so many attractions shut down in that park that you just couldn't have that many people in there, because there wasn't enough for them all to do. Now Epcot is getting to be sort of the same way, and so it's an issue for Florida for sure. And it may be the case that pass prices go up. Maybe the Florida resident prices go up. I don't know. I mean, somebody put in the chat, like the top of the line Platinum Pass that gets you into the water parks and all is like $1,300. But the Gold Pass that gets you into almost everything, most of the time, there's some blackout times, but not much, is about half that. It's about $600, $650.
It's interesting that in both parks, Disneyland and Disney World, I think there's a huge correlation with the implementation of the payment plans to the overcrowdingness as well. They made the barrier to entry so low that people signed up for it.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly true. Yeah, because I think one of them too, I think I was reading that it was $8 a month or something for one of them. I was like, oh, who's not going to do that?
Right. I mean, that's like cheaper than Disney Plus almost. But I've been saying for a while, I would absolutely be willing to pay more money to avoid crowds. And, if they can make that happen, you're going to get much higher guest satisfaction for sure.
Yeah, but what would we be willing to pay? Would we be willing to pay, $100 a day to go to the Fast Pass line? Would we be willing to pay $200 a day?
Well, I mean,
what's that number?
you look at Universal Studios and their Express Pass. Their Express Pass costs almost as much as the park ticket itself. Like the park ticket is like 110, and the Express Pass is like 90. But considering you can get twice as much done in a day, you're getting essentially 2 days out of your one-day park ticket. You're making, you're getting the same amount of attraction rides in one day as you would over 2 days, and you're paying the same amount as you would for a 2-day ticket. Plus, you're saving a whole day that you can go to the water parks or the pool or something. So clearly, there's people willing to pay it at Universal. The problem is if they were to offer paid or Fast Pass or some sort of Express Pass like Universal, where it's kind of unlimited. They would have to seriously curtail the number of Fast Passes they give out to resort guests because there's not enough of them. There will be too many people going into the Fast Pass line because they paid $100 for it. They're going to do it, and the people that made the resort passes, you could go in. You get 3 Fast Passes a day, but there's so many resort hotel guests at Walt Disney World that it still is too many Fast Passes. They just give out too many Fast Passes.
Brian in the chat said, I think the Max Pass is coming, and I completely agree with that. I think that's probably what's going to...
Yeah, the thing with Max Pass, so like I was at Disneyland when they came out with Max Pass, and it was $10 a day, and that was totally worth it. You could still get Fast Passes. You just had to go to the attraction to get it, versus Max Pass lets you do it on your phone. So the question is, are they going to get rid of this Fast Pass system that you could book 2 months in advance? And what's that?
I said I'd be so excited if they got rid of the.
Oh yeah.
If
oh
we
yeah.
continued that.
Absolutely. I would too. I think as far as the queues now, right? Like there's no Fast Pass in Florida now. And the queues, the lines are extremely long, but that's because there's 6 feet of space in between each person. So even though the Haunted Mansion line, I've seen it go from Haunted Mansion to basically Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, that line moves so fast, it's almost like you can keep walking. Like it doesn't stop moving. You've got an Omnimover and you've got a line with 6 feet in between each people. That's pretty much that line's pretty much going to just keep moving, and it does. And so that's the great thing about not having Fast Passes now, is that the lines move so much faster that you can look at a line and say, "Holy smokes, that line is really long," but in reality, you're only going to be in that line for 10 or 15 minutes, and it makes the length of the line so much more tolerable when it moves. And that's what people don't get about Fast Pass and how it has such a negative impact on the speed at which the standby lines move. I would absolutely be in favor of some kind of Max Pass thing where people didn't make Fast Passes in advance. You made them the day of. And you either made them the day of on your phone or you had to go to the machines to get it. But honestly, I think people would be so opposed to going to the machines to get a Fast Pass. Like, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Fast Pass doesn't come back. And this is at Disneyland, too. If Fast Pass doesn't come back and it's only Max Pass.
I could see it happening. It's easier to track you too.
It's easier to track you. You know how many people get it. It's easier to turn it off when you run out. And you get $10 a person.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think
and I think it's a better user experience as well.
It is, because you're not running all over the place.
Yeah. I will say though too, with this last time that we were there without, the fast passes or anything, it was the first time that I had seen so many of the queues.
Yeah.
Because it had been so long since I had seen the queues. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember how beautiful this one was.
Yep.
Peter Pan. I was like, wow, I haven't
Peter
seen
Pan,
this
I know.
forever.
Peter Pan was the one that did it for me too. I'd never seen the new queue in Peter Pan until July.
This is really beautiful.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Huh.
And it's kind of great too, not having to crisscross the park to get your max pass, your fast pass on the other side of the park. So being able to stay in, in Tomorrowland and doing everything in Tomorrowland before you move on to another piece of the park, it's a different experience.
I agree. I think I've seen very few people who visit Disney World in the past 6 months complain about fast passes not being available. I mean, at the beginning they complained, but then once they got to the park and experienced the park without fast pass, those complaints went away. They absolutely stopped complaining, and they just enjoyed the fast-moving lines, and that was it. I think you don't see, of people that have gone to the parks, you definitely do not see any kind of significant number of complaints about the lack of fast pass.
No. I've been fortunate enough to have been able to have gone to the park 3 times in the past 6 months, and even when I went in November and the parks were crowded, even when it was crowded, not having fast passes, it was a better experience than it not being than having fast passes when it's crowded.
Yeah, agreed. I agree.
Also, too, when the queues were, if there was one that we didn't feel like waiting in, we just we played sorcerers and whatnot, and
Can't
it just
do that
didn't even
anymore.
feel like. I know.
I didn't even have that on the list. That seems like
Put
something
it
we
on the
probably should
list.
talk about, but
I have. No, I'm just kidding. That made me sad.
yeah, I know.
Although I heard Jason's lending out his wand if anyone's going over to
Universal. I'm not.
Universal.
I'm renting out my wand. Renting out, not lending. But if you take advantage of the Nick's Maxi van service and pay Nick for a ride to the airport, then Nick and I have an agreement where you could get a day's use of the wand for free. So
hey, with cancellation of Magic Express, he might make some money.
But yeah, so everybody's talking about Max Pass in the chat, and it being like $20 a day, and I could see them doing it at Disney World, and like if you're part of the member, if you're a member in the whatever membership program, then you get it for like $10, and everybody else gets it for like $20 a day. And if you don't get it, you just don't have Fast Pass. It's like Universal then at that point. You either have Express Pass or you have nothing. There's not any option in between. And Universal charges $90 for Express Pass. So the fact that Disney charges only $20 for Max Pass, I think they could absolutely jack that price up if, there's not 3 Fast Passes free for everybody 60 days in advance. And I think that 60 days in advance thing, people got annoyed with that too.
Well, it's stressful.
Like there's that, between that and park, now there's park passes, then dining reservations. I mean, I was actually really happy when the dining reservations are now only like 60 days in advance and not 182. That was...
Remember when you could walk up to the kiosks at Epcot and talk to a person and make a same-day reservation?
The World Key Information System. Yep.
Love that.
That was the best thing.
We used to always hope, let Alfredo's be available.
Yeah, right? That was the thing that we did. Every time we went to Epcot, my grandmother would go and get us a reservation at Alfredo's because she thought that was the only place that the kids would eat. So we ate at Alfredo's every day we went to Epcot because either the adults didn't want to eat anywhere else, or they thought the kids wouldn't eat anywhere else. So I'm still angry because I missed out on the Le Cellier Buffeteria before it became the steakhouse. I would have loved to go to that, but yeah.
I'd like to mention that I've been having the song "If You Had Wings" in my head since.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sad that I walked through Tomorrowland on Wednesday, and I was just sad. Like, Stitch is closed, and Laugh Floor is closed, and Buzz Lightyear has like an insane wait. It's sad.
I'm not going to lie. I'm most looking forward to the People Mover coming back online. It's one of my favorite rides in the park.
You know, I was there. I was there from Saturday to Wednesday, and this was the worst scheduled trip I've ever made, because at first the People Mover was going to be open, and I was really excited, and then that got delayed, and then Gideon's was going to be open. I was really excited, and then Gideon's closed, and then they opened the day after I left. It's like I timed this trip so poorly it wasn't even funny. But luckily I'll go back, so it's okay. And I had Gideon's cookies before. There was one night where Nick brought them into the studio from the Orlando location. What I think is crazy about that Gideon's and the 12-hour line, and everybody's like, oh, but there's like limited cookies that you can only get today. Well, those limited cookies that you could only get that day are just their regular monthly cookies from other months of the year. So, like, the one Frankenstein cookie is their October cookie. Now, granted, you could get it for one day when they opened, but come October, you'll be able to get it every day. It wasn't like a special recipe that they're not making anymore. So people waited 12 hours. Maybe they waited 12 hours in line for the lithograph. I don't know. Like, they were giving out lithographs. But, like, I mean, Gideon's lithograph, I don't know, holds the same cachet for a Disney collector as, like, an Awesome Planet lithograph they gave out the first day that movie opened. Even though that's a bad movie anyways. But, you know, I mean, a 12-hour wait for a cookie is... I've never seen anything like it. That really blew me away. I mean, that was longer than, like, the waits at World of Disney when Downtown Disney first reopened. And it's a cookie store. I mean, yeah, they're good, but still... It was crazy. That was...
I don't know. Like, are they putting gold in those cookies? What's in those cookies?
I mean, they're putting something that must be very addicting in those cookies. They call it fine ground coffee.
How are the crowds at Disney Springs? Are they returning to normal there? Did you drop by when you were there last week?
We had dinner on Monday night at Springs. We ate in Wine Bar George, which is spectacular, by the way, especially if you like steak and wine. The crowds weren't bad. Like we had an early dinner. It was 5:30, I think, and so after dinner, it was like 7 o'clock, 7:30. We were walking around a little bit. That's when I went and got my phone case. But like World of Disney did not have a virtual queue. Nothing had a virtual queue. Nothing even had a line. World of Disney didn't even have a line to get in. You could just walk right in the door. So yeah, I think now that the Christmas shopping season is over, Springs is definitely going back to normal. I just saw in the chat, Andy Rollo says he would wait 12 hours to meet me, which is nice, I guess. I'm a little worried. But yeah, Springs is going back to normal, which is nice. I will go there now. I didn't go before Christmas. Like, I was like, I'm just not going to go to Springs. But I will go now. It's not too bad. except for the day that Gideon's opens. That's bad. But Springs is fine now. It's generally okay. Parking's generally okay. And Epcot too. Like, I went to Studios on Sunday, and it was pretty crowded. And then I went to Epcot on Tuesday, and it really wasn't. Epcot on Tuesday was pretty quiet. There were not long waits. I mean, I didn't do any rides, but there weren't long waits for the rides. And we walked around and did festival stuff, and there really weren't lines for any of the booths except for Italy. There was a long line, and there was one other one that the line was pretty long. But even like the really popular ones, like the Canada booth, didn't have a line. The longest line we might have hit all day was for the poutine, the lobster poutine.
Wow.
But that was like
which looks amazing.
Oh, it was good. It was really good.
I might wait 12 hours.
Say that again, Heather?
I might wait 12 hours for that.
It was good. I don't know if I'd wait 12 hours, but it was good. But yeah, if you watched the live stream on Tuesday, Axel and Eric and I were there, and Jill joined us. That was fun. We had been walking all around World Showcase. Like, I'd walked around all the World Showcase before the stream since like 11 in the morning, snacking on things. And then we started the stream, and then we walked around and snacked on more things, and we got that carrot margarita in Mexico that everybody was talking about. But for the most part, the lines weren't long at all. And Epcot was really, really pretty calm. And the festival stuff was a lot of fun. Like, we saw Voices of Liberty. That was great. It wasn't crowded. Some of the entertainment, especially in World Showplace, is a little bit weird. There's like these acrobats that do weird things, and it's not, I don't know. It was odd. But then there's like painters that do painting things too, and that's pretty cool. And then you get to a lot of the artists were, because it was opening weekend of the festival, a lot of the artists were there. So I got to meet Dave Avanzino, and I bought 2 of his pieces and had them signed. I know McBiff was there at some point. I think Shag was there at some point. Like, a lot of the artists were there, which was pretty cool.
Hey Jason, will they ship the art from the booths, or
Sure.
How do you shipping for those?
They will do home shipping, just like any other store in Walt Disney World do home shipping. They'll do that for the art too. Yeah, I actually went the day I was at Wednesday morning when I was at Magic Kingdom. They did the gargoyles with the candles from the stretching room that they had on sale a couple weeks ago. They finally came back in stock. And so I ran over to Memento. I'm walking into the park, and I'm passing people with these giant bags with these giant white boxes. And I'm like, what is that? And I realized it was the gargoyles. And so I ran back to Memento Mori, and I bought 2, and I had them shipped home. So they will ship stuff home. They've always have. I don't think they've stopped doing that. But they will do that for the artwork too. The trouble is, I think the shipping cost isn't based on the size or the weight of the item. It's based on the price of the item.
Oh.
And so I got the 2 gargoyles shipped. The gargoyles were $90 each, minus pass holder discount. And I got the 2 of them shipped for like $16. And I mean, they came in a huge box. But like, I was buying a piece of Dave Avanzino artwork that was $900. That would have cost a ton to ship, even though it was a much smaller box than the gargoyles. So you got to watch. It depends on what you buy and how much it costs. I mean, if you buy a giant item that's only $10, it'll be really cheap to ship. But if you buy a really small item that costs $1,000, it's going to cost an arm and a leg to ship. So it's really a odd, but I mean it's the best they can do because they don't have like scales at every store or whatever. So it is what it is. Sometimes you can take advantage of it, sometimes you don't. Yeah, Desi is saying her husband asked if they could replace all the lights in the house with the gargoyles, and she said no. So what's funny is I bought a gargoyle, and I bought one for my sister, and I had them both shipped home. And so they show up at my house, and I didn't tell my wife that I bought these. And so they showed up on Friday. They showed up on Saturday, yesterday, and we opened them, and there were two of them, and my wife thought that I had bought two and was ready to open both and put them on either side of our mantle. And I'm like, no, wait, they're not both ours. She was a little upset. So I might have to buy more. I don't know. But, yeah. A Drager in the chat says that he shipped a painting home and they lost it, and it took 2 months. Yeah, that was my big concern with the Dave Avanzino piece that I bought, because it was a limited edition of 25, and when I bought one, I bought the second to the last one. So there was only one more left, and if they would have lost it, I would have been very upset. So that's part of the reason why even shipping insurance would have got my money back, but I wouldn't have been able to get another piece of the artwork because it would have been sold out at that point. So that was my big concern too. Yeah, I could have Jill buy more gargoyles and ship them. Maybe I'll do that. Penguin Project is asking which was the piece. So this is an interesting story, and I'll tell the story because Dave Avanzino told me the story. So Dave did a piece. It was a 3-dimensional paper sculpture piece of the Haunted Mansion singing busts in front of the Haunted Mansion gate, and this piece was released at the Haunted Mansion 50th anniversary event in Disneyland last year. Well, not 2019, right? So that was a big merchandise event. The 50th anniversary merchandise event in Disneyland in 2019. And so Dave did this piece. It was a limited edition of 25, and it was like $900 and some dollars. I think 900 or 990 or something like that. But it's really cool, and it's like 3-dimensional in like a shadow box kind of thing. And everyone who was at the Haunted Mansion event in Disneyland, you know, they sold out very quickly. And I say sold out, they sold out because Disney sold 23 out of the 25 of them and didn't know where the other 2 were.
Oh.
So everybody at that event that wanted one, that couldn't get one, were told that they were sold out. And then Dave was telling me before he came down for Festival of the Arts, Disney calls him up and says, hey, we have 2 more of these pieces. You might as well just put them on display at the festival and sell them. And they're from the Haunted Mansion 50th anniversary event. And I'm like, wow, because I got one, and there were tons of people that paid a lot of money to go to that event in Disneyland, and they didn't get one. But that's Disney's merchandise inventory tracking system for you. There was another piece that Dave was telling me about that was released at the D23 Expo, and it was an Expo exclusive piece, limited edition of 25 or something like that. And Disney called him up the other day and said, hey, we found one of these. Like, I don't know where these things go, that they lose them and then they just find them like a year or a year and a half later. So, like, you think Shop Disney's bad and they can't get you your merchandise? Well, imagine if, like, you created limited edition of 25 pieces of artwork and then Disney just loses 2 of them. And they don't know where they are and they turn up a year and a half later. Like, that's pretty absurd. For a $900 piece of artwork, that's pretty absurd. But anyway, I'm happy because I got one. It
Sounds
was
awesome.
it was like there was a lot of nice pieces of artwork at the festival. I mean, there was a Macbeth piece that I really liked that I wanted to get, but I didn't because he wasn't there to sign it when I was ready to buy it. There were a couple of I can't remember the name. I'm drawing a blank. Dave Granito. There were Dave Granito pieces that I liked. I have a couple of his pieces already. There were some of them that were really neat, but this Haunted Mansion piece from the Haunted Mansion 50th was absolutely amazing, and I'm glad I bought it. And now knowing the story behind it, I'm even more excited that I bought it. And the only problem is that it was too big to bring home, so it's still with Jill in Orlando for the next month or so until we drive home. But
I'm actually very much looking forward to going to the festival, and I'm fortunate that my wife is letting me go unsupervised.
Wow.
So there is no telling what will come home.
So here's the problem: is that you don't get pass holder discounts on the artwork. That's the biggest issue. So it's unfortunate, but also, if that means more money goes to the artist, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah. So a little different when the money's going to the artist versus going to Lex Luthor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, some of our favorite interactions are with the artists. Just spending some time chatting about why they drew a particular picture, why they painted it, why. So we have a few, but the story behind them is always an additional exciting thing about it, not just the amazing artwork itself. But hey, another advantage to driving down is you get to carry the artwork flat in the back of the car with you, and you don't have to worry as much about it.
Absolutely. So there's another piece from Dave that I bought that was was an Epcot piece on wood, and that wasn't that big, and it actually fit in my suitcase. And I thought, well, since it's wood and it fits in my suitcase, I have a hard-sided suitcase. Nothing was going to happen to it. So I brought that one home in my suitcase. But the Haunted Mansion one was just too big. It wouldn't even fit at all. And it was bigger than my suitcase, so I'm sure they would have had a problem with me as a carry-on. But then again, the plane was only half full on my trip back, so maybe they would have let me slide. But you don't know that in advance until you get there, so it's like you have to. It's a risk. But yeah, we'll drive back, and it'll have a nice, safe spot in the car, and it'll be happy.
I'm looking forward to it. I should probably stay away from the margaritas before I do my art shopping, but I'm looking forward to see what I can find.
I'd stay away from the margaritas. I would stay away from the red wine mixed with Mr. Pibb in the World Showplace. That was another thing that Tom got, and he's like, this is horrible. And I really like Mr. Pibb, so I wanted to try it myself, so I got it. And yeah, I can't really recommend it. I mean, I don't really like red wine either, so that's maybe part of the problem. But I wouldn't recommend the red wine with Mr. Pibb. I wouldn't recommend... The carrot margarita was okay. There's plenty of better margaritas in Epcot, but the carrot one was okay. If you're looking for something that's a bit weird and out of the ordinary, and you con people into clicking like on your live stream to get you to buy one, then it's okay. It's definitely drinkable. So I think it looks like Brian in the chat is asking all about Ron because he misses seeing Ron's hair. Yeah. So Ron's not on tonight because we knew this was going to be a long show as it was. He might come back next week. I don't know whether he's got his hair cut or not. So unfortunately, you may or may not have Ron with the special hair that you like so much.
Yeah, none of us can really fill in that respect.
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no.
We still aren't able to officially get a haircut here. where I live. I don't know if it's the same you, but I just did get a haircut, but I had to go knock on a back door of a barber shop, and they let me in to cut my hair. But you still can't get a legal haircut here.
I don't
We're not
need
allowed to
one.
do anything.
So
We can't even go. They only let us go grocery shopping here right now, and it's contactless. They don't want you going in the grocery stores. You just open your trunk, they put it in, and you go.
I mean, that makes the most sense, right? Like, here's my thing, is that they said, like, at the beginning of the pandemic, well, they have to keep grocery stores open because they're essential and people need to eat, which is true, but they don't need to let you go into the grocery store in order to get you food. And so, to me, that's something they should have done from the beginning of the pandemic, was saying, you have to shop online for groceries just like you shop online for everything else, and we'll put it in your car, and you're not allowed into the grocery store with hundreds of other shoppers, and the cashiers aren't exposed to 10 or 20 people going through the checkout line every hour. It makes a lot of sense, and I can absolutely see in a place like California that somehow has the worst pandemic rate in the entire country, even though Disneyland hasn't been open. I can absolutely see them putting that kind of restriction on things because it makes sense, right? Like it's got to be much safer to go to Disneyland and ride the Mad Tea Party in an outdoor setting than it is to go to a grocery store. And I've been saying this for months now too. I feel safer in Walt Disney World than I do in the Publix grocery store in Florida, because people wear masks and you're outdoors, and it's like I think the problem is that this whole pandemic thing has been politicized to the extent that people don't use their common sense anymore. And I'm not going on a rant because it's already after 10 o'clock, but
Look at
but yeah, it's like people just don't use their common sense. I don't get it. I just don't get it. But anyway, if there's anything else that you guys want to talk about,
I have
related
one
to,
quick fact.
yeah, sure.
This is kind of random, but did you see that Bob Iger gave $5 million to Southern California small businesses?
I did see that.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Too bad it benefits. Too bad it's not enough to benefit the people that work for his company. Right? Like he might have been
Waiting for
able.
you.
He might have been able to take care of the people that actually work for his company, but no, he laid them off, and I'm sure they're not happy about him giving money to other businesses instead of the one that he runs. But
I think he's getting ready to run for office eventually.
I mean, may or may not be okay. It depends. I mean, if he cuts the budget of the country like he cuts the budget at Walt Disney, maybe our taxes will go down. I don't know. But I guess if he runs on a budget cut platform, you got to believe him because he's got plenty of experience with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything else?
That's all I have.
Nope. I think we said it all for another week anyway.
Yeah.
You win.
If you had wings, had wings, had wings. Okay. I know somebody who was listening last week when I talked about a meetup in Hershey Park sent an email to Tom, and I'm not sure why, because Tom didn't even know about it. But if you're interested in the Hershey Park meetup this summer, send an email to me, Jason at WDWNT.com, and don't send the email to Tom because he'll probably yell at me. So yeah, but that's still a thing we're thinking of, and yeah, let's see. I didn't get to my rant that I had written down, but that rant is kind of an evergreen one. I can bring that up anytime we need something to talk about. So maybe next week we'll see what happens in the news. And we'll be back next week. We will be back with 2 new panelists. I think we're going to bring on the last 2 of the 8 that I think we're going to take. Although, I'm not sure. I just keep bringing 2 new people on every week. Maybe I'll keep going. I don't know. But we'll definitely have 2 new people next week. So everyone who auditioned and hasn't heard from me yet, don't lose hope just yet. It will. I'll get back to you this week. Yeah, and I guess that's it for tonight. Anything else before we?
I do want to say thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think certainly having 2 Californians on is important when we have some big Disneyland news. So
Yeah, definitely.
I'll definitely have you guys back next time there's Disneyland news. And yeah, hopefully we've had all the Disneyland bad news we can handle for a while, and next time we have Disneyland news, it'll be good news. But until that time, tune in next week. Until then, tune in tomorrow night for Cosmic Read Live. Tune in Wednesday for Park Center. Thursday for WDW News Tonight. If you can't sleep and you're awake at like 10 o'clock on Tuesday night, you can tune in for Tom versus Josh.
I love that show. It's hilarious.
Yeah? I'll tell
It
Tom
is.
you said that. It's not one of my favorites.
I think it's hilarious.
I like the idea.
They have such a kind of a strange and interesting dynamic between the 2 of them. I find it very entertaining.
And I think the show is a great idea that they have these power-ups and stuff, but they just don't use the power-ups. And so
I didn't even know that there was such a thing.
Yeah, see,
that
that's right.
Rules or,
so I like the idea. They need to use the power-ups. That would make it a better show. All right. With that, I'm going to say goodnight on behalf of my panelists, Rob and Heather. Thanks for coming on. Welcome. Rich, thanks for coming back from your...
Always a pleasure.
From your paneled 1960s office there. And we'll see everyone next week at the same time, same place here at 8 p.m. on WDWNT channel on YouTube. Stay tuned all week to news, because the news is what drives the show. And if we don't have news, then, I don't know, then Pressing Issues is going to be like an hour long next week. So there's always news. I hope that we have things to talk about next week. If not, I'll just have to come up with extra rants to take up the time. But anyway, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the like button before you leave. And have a good night. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Night all.